thank you all for being here. I'm Joanna from Actera. This is our heat pump water heater workshop, and we're really excited for everyone who's able to come today. So today I'll just be kind of talking about who Actera is, who helped put on this event, Silicon Valley Power, and then I'll pass it over to Wei-Tai, who will be our resident heat pump water heater expert. So just a little bit about Actera. We're a nonprofit based in the Bay Area. We started in Palo Alto about 55 years ago. We're celebrating our 55th anniversary this year, and we encourage climate solutions for our local community, and we operate in all 9 counties of the Bay Area. And for this event, oh, by the way, I completely forgot. We are going to be going over some polls very briefly, just to get an idea of what where everyone's coming from and what we're currently dealing with in terms of heat pump water heaters. So if, Irvin, if you put up the first poll already. So our first question, what city are you joining us from? I think, are they able to see all four? And then just how familiar are you with heat pump water heaters and what kind do you have one if you know? And why you're here. We just wanted to know, just for our future workshops. A couple more seconds for people to answer. Okay, cool. So, oh, there we go. Nice. So I won't talk about where people are from, but it's cool to see that we have a range of prior knowledge about heat pump water heaters. Most people have natural gas already. Um, cool. And most people are here to learn about rebates and incentives, which totally makes sense. And also here for environmental reasons too, upgrading old appliances, clean technology. Okay, great. Thanks so much. Okay. Now to finish my little Actera spiel, as I said, climate nonprofit. We're here to help put on this event for heat pump water heaters to learn about the technology behind them, its cost-saving benefits and efficiency benefits, and how to go through the installation process. And with that, some best practices for this Zoom. It looks like everyone's already muted, so that's great. Please stay muted for the duration of the presentation. As I said, this will be recorded and put on YouTube as well as sent out in our follow-up email. Cameras can stay on or off, not really a big deal either way. And put your questions in the chat. We'll also have time at the end to go over them, but if something strikes you along the way, feel free to put it in the chat as well. So as I said, this event was sponsored with Silicon Valley Power. They are Santa Clara's municipal electric utility. They work directly with the city, and they've been collaborating with the city for many years now. It has one of the lowest electric rates among all municipality utilities in California, and they have attached their energy conservation hotline here for when you have any, if you are a Santa Clara resident and you have any questions. So some of the heat pump water heater rebates they have for those switching from a natural gas to an electric heat pump, you can get up to $3,000, $4,000 for income qualifying customers. And some people might need a panel upgrade as part of their upgrade to a heat pump water heater. You can get an additional $1,500 off, or $2,500 off for those who are income qualifying. Oh, and to qualify, you should also make sure that you're getting an Energy Star certified heat pump. They also have electric to electric heat pump water heater replacements for those switching from electric resistance water heaters to heat pumps. That doesn't seem to apply to anyone here today, but for future reference. And you can get $500 off of that. They also must be star certified, and you can get another $500 off for income qualifying people. And with that, I'm gonna stop sharing screen so Wei-Tai can give a little bit of his own explanation. Take it away.
Great. Thank you, Joanna, and welcome everybody. Good to see you all. Thanks for joining us this evening to learn about heat pump technology. My name is Wei-Tai Kwok, and I live in the San Francisco Bay Area in the city of Lafayette in the East Bay. And before I start my presentation, I'll just say a few words of why I'm here as your speaker tonight. And for that, I have to go back to 2006 when my wife took me down to the Orinda movie theater and we saw a documentary film called An Inconvenient Truth, which was a movie featuring former Vice President Al Gore talking about global warming and the climate crisis. And I remember walking out of the movie theater that day thinking, gee, we don't have 100 years to solve this problem. We probably only have 30 to 40 years. And so we need to get started right away. And I resolved months after seeing that film to try to be a part of the solution in my daily lives and whatever I was doing. I wanted to see how could I challenge myself to be not part of the problem, but be part of the solution. And so over the last 19 years, can't believe it's been that long since we've seen the movie, I've done a lot of things. And one of the things we're going to focus on today is what we can do in our homes with retrofitting our houses and specifically our hot water heater. So with that, let me share my screen and we will get started here. So um, I saw that film in 2006, as I mentioned, but it wasn't until 2019, over a decade later, that I started to think about why do we have to burn natural gas in our homes? I thought it was like really hard, really time consuming. It was going to be really hard to get rid of gas in our homes, but it turned out that I was wrong about that. And so in 2019, decided my wife and I, we were going to try to get rid of all the gas appliances in our house. So today, as I mentioned, I'm going to talk a little bit more about our heat pump water heater. Why is it that heat pump water heaters are actually very important? Of all the appliances in my house, when people ask me, "Hey, wait, Ty, you've been a climate advocate for almost 20 years. What's your first bit of advice to people who want to make a difference?" And I say, get rid of your gas water heater because that gas water heater accounts for typically 28% of a California's home energy use. You can see on this pie chart, space heating, air conditioning and heating is 26%, or heating is 26, cooling at AC 10%, and so on and so forth. So it's a very meaningful action you can take, and it's, price wise and value wise, it's actually good as well. And we'll talk about the money side of things more later. Um, but in 2019, I was worried that going all electric might be expensive. And so being sort of a research-oriented person, I read lots and lots of reports, and especially these two reports, Decarbonization of Heating Energy Use in California Buildings by Synapse and RMI's Economics of Electrifying Buildings. I'll spare you the reading of hundreds of pages of these reports, and basically, to cut to the chase, the conclusion was that for most new home construction, we find electrification of space and water heating and air conditioning reduces the homeowner's costs over the lifetime of the appliances when compared with performing the same function with fossil fuels. That means for a new home, if we went all electric instead of what I did with gas originally, it would have, the payback would have been cheaper to go all electric. But what these reports didn't really cover was, well, what about retrofits? What if, not new homes, but if I have a home and I want to take out my water heaters, it's still cost effective. And so I went on this path to try to figure this issue out myself. Now I live in the suburbs. As I mentioned, I live in Lafayette, so that's my home, typical suburban home. And in my house, I said, well, if we were going to get rid of all our fossil fuel appliances, what are those going to be? Well, I had a gas furnace, a gas hot water heater, gas cooktop, and a gas fireplace. And it turns out that uh, I was able to get rid of all those appliances in 45 days and convert to an all electric house and disconnect from PG&E's gas grid and remove my gas meter. But we're just going to focus today on the gas water heater portion of this, and we're going to do a little deep dive. Here's our agenda of things we're going to cover. What is a heat pump water heater? What are the advantages? What are the challenges and issues? Where do you install them? The costs and incentives. What about installers? And there's time for questions at the end here. So I would encourage you to type your questions in the chat as they come up. I'm not going to stop, but we'll pick them all up when we get to the Q&A. And so I'd invite you to go ahead and just type your questions in the chat when they come up. I invite anybody in the audience, if you have answers to the questions in the chat, to go ahead and provide those answers or links, because this is a group exercise. We can all share our knowledge and help each other. I don't know all the answers, but I'm here to share my experiences with you. So let's dive in first and talk about why are even we talking about heat pump water heaters and why are they so beneficial? Well, it turns out it's because they're super energy efficient. When we look at on the left-hand side, the gas water heaters, they when you burn something, you lose you're getting less efficiency, 67 to 73% efficient heat from gas. If you have a standard electric heater, it's about 95%, and the heat pump on the far right is 200 to 400% efficient. I think many of you who answered the survey just now are mostly natural gas. That's very, very common in California as the leading source. But just need to remember that the heat pump on the right-hand side is way more efficient than these older technologies. So, I've heard the word heat pumps for like 20, 30 years, but honestly, I didn't really understand what that was until I started reading about it. So can I take a quiz here and ask you to name an appliance in your home that uses heat pump technologies? Go ahead and type it in the chat. And since I can't see the screen, I'm going to ask from Actera to go ahead and read out some responses for me. What are people typing in the chat here?
Let's see, we got split AC, refrigerator, HVAC, lots of fridge, ACs.
All right, good, good. Well, a refrigerator is actually probably the most common appliance in people's homes that use heat pump technology. And what does that mean? What does heat pump do in a refrigerator? It takes the heat from inside the refrigerator and pumps it outside, making the inside of the refrigerator colder and colder and colder, right? So that's why if you wear bare feet in your front of your refrigerator, you might feel warm air being blown across your toes. That's the heat being transferred from inside the refrigerator out, right? And so that's how a refrigerator works. A heat pump moves heat from one place to another. And so you can think of the hot water heater as the inverse of your refrigerator, because what the hot water heater is doing is taking heat from the room and moving it inside to the water that's stored in the tank and raising the temperature of the water. So it's the exact reverse of your refrigerator, but it's the same technology that we've been using for many decades. It's more advanced, more energy efficient, but it's not really actually all that revolutionary. Um, I'd want to share with you a little video here to explain how heat pumps work. So let's watch this 60-second video and learn more details.
Heat pump water heaters use the heat and humidity from room air to heat water stored in an insulated tank, making them much more efficient than standard electric water heaters. A fan pulls room air across an evaporator coil, transferring heat from the air into refrigerant in the coil. The heat turns the refrigerant into a vapor. A compressor compresses the vapor and pumps it through condenser coils that are wrapped around the tank. After transferring heat to the water in the tank, the refrigerant turns back into a liquid and the process repeats. Like standard electric water heaters, the heat pump has upper and lower heating elements that operate automatically when the room is too cold for the heat pump to work efficiently or when there's a larger than normal demand. Since heat pump water heaters produce condensation, a condensation drainage system is needed. In some cases, a condensation pump is used to remove condensate.
All right. That's the best 60-second video on hot water heaters. And I do want to call out, since that went so quickly, there's something that I want to call out about this technology. Because there's a mention of a hybrid heat pump. That's what's shown on your screen right now. And I want to just emphasize that what is a hybrid heat pump versus this one that's not hybrid? Well, remember, I told you that heat pump units run at 200 to 400% efficiency. And so in this picture, which is a very typical heat pump water heater, you've got the heat pump on top of the water tank, right? That's the black circle up there. That's the one that's got the heat pump unit. And then he talked about an upper element and lower element. And that is, if you remember the old cooktops where you have a radiant element that when you run electricity through it, it turns red and it boils water. And it does that at about 95, 100% efficiency. So it does it faster, but it's only 100% efficient. Whereas the heat pump unit on top runs a little more slowly, but much more efficiently. So it gets you to 200 to 400%. It reduces your bills. So most of the time, we want to be running in heat pump mode for economical reasons. But when, like, if you had a whole bunch of guests come over and you had 7 people taking a shower in a row, and then you might need to recharge the water quickly, you would use the radiant elements in a hybrid heat pump, and it will switch back and forth. So I just want to call out that difference, that not all of the heat pumps will have the elements at the bottom. Some of them only have the top, but the hybrid ones have both. Okay. I think the hybrid one is a great choice for California. I don't happen to have one myself, but I think that's a very common and a great choice. Now, these days, you guess what? You operate everything with an app, and you can operate your heat pump water heater with an app also. Here's a picture of a heat pump water heater app, and I wanted to share with you the 4 modes that you can set your water heater. The first mode is heat pump only mode. So this one maximizes your savings. It's the most energy efficient mode because it only uses that heat pump on the top there. The hybrid mode, as the second choice, saves while experiencing faster recovery when you have those guests or use a lot of the water. The hybrid mode is a factory setting combining heat pump efficiency and savings with recovery rates of standard electric when needed, right? And then the electric only, I don't know why anybody would do this, but you would only use the electric portion at the bottom, and the bottom is vacation mode. If you go away, you can set the temperature point down and save money if you're away. So you can basically use the app. They're a lot smarter than our heat pumps, than our water heaters from before. Now, I also wanted to share with you that heat pumps come in 2 form factors. The one on the left is what we call the single unit. That's what we saw in the video there. And the one on the right is a split unit where the tank, in this case, this is my house actually, and that's my water heater. That I have an 83-gallon stainless steel tank in my house, but then I actually have the heat pump outside my house. And in this case, there's a 50-foot distance that you could use. This product is made by Sanco too. So there are 2 different form factors, and your plumber can recommend what's most ideal for your home. So let's now switch over and pivot to a discussion on what are the advantages of heat pump water heaters. Well, for those for climate-friendly reasons, you could say there's no more gas combustion, and therefore there's no carbon dioxide pollution coming out of our gas water heaters. This is a picture of my old gas water heater, and you sort of have to have that vent because there's a fire going on under there, right? You want to vent it out of there, out of your house. You don't want it in the garage, in your water heater closet. I used to have a carbon monoxide monitor close by because there's sometimes if that you're not venting it all through that pipe and some of it was coming into your house, it's toxic and dangerous. So I was happy to be able to get rid of my carbon monoxide monitor and basically have a healthier situation in my house. We should also remember that an all-electric appliance can be powered by 100% renewable energy from solar and wind sources. And so this is truly a path of an all-electric home is a way for us to move away from relying on fossil fuels. So that's one set of advantages. Now, what are the challenges and issues to installing a heat pump water heater in your home? Well, let's go through a couple of them. One of those is that these heat pump water heaters have generally needed a 240 volt outlet with a 30 amp breaker. Um, you therefore may need both a plumber and an electrician, or somebody who's licensed as a general contractor and has permits to do both in order to do your install. Another question then is there enough room in your electrical panel to put a dedicated 240 volt with a 30 amp breaker? Will you need a service panel upgrade? But one of the solutions to these problems that has just been coming out in the last couple of years is that they're new 120 volt 15 amp units. So they're less powerful, they take longer to run, but guess what? You can just plug them into an existing 120 volt outlet. And those are viable for smaller, homes with smaller numbers of residents. And so that's definitely a very interesting alternative now for a good chunk of California's population can look into these easier to install 120 volt units. And again, your plumber can help you make that decision. Another issue to be aware of is that a heat pump water heater generates cold air and dehumidifies. So in the summertime, that's really good because you get some free cooling, but in the wintertime, that might not be so good. So you have to see where you might locate your water heater due to the fact that it's, again, taking heat out of the air. Remember, it's a reverse of your refrigerator, so it's taking heat out of the ambient local air and moving it into the water. And so how much air do you need around it? Well, you need a minimum room size of a 7 foot by 10 foot by 10 foot room to put it in, or bigger. Or if you don't have a room and you're sticking it in a closet, you need some louvered doors so that it can get its air from a room at least that size. You can also get an air duct and duct your air to come in from elsewhere outside, usually, to feed the heat to the heat pump. And another issue, as we saw in the video, is that you need to run a condensate line because just like when we drive our cars in the summertime with the air conditioning on and we put it in our driveway, that there's water dripping out from under our car because there's condensation. And so the heat pump will have condensation, especially in the summer, humid months, and you need to be able to have to drain that somewhere. That's unlike a current gas unit. Now, these heat pumps can have an air filter that needs to be cleaned periodically, and they're louder than a gas water heater because they have a fan and a pump. But as we talked about with our refrigerator example, the sound is about the sound of your refrigerator. So it's not that noisy, but if you're sensitive to noise, then be sure to check it out and for the sound issues. One of the challenges I had was that many plumbers actually try to talk you into a gas or tankless gas. When I said, "Hey, I want a heat pump water heater," they said, "Why do you want that? It's so expensive, or doesn't, nobody uses those. Why don't you just get a gas one, or you should get a tankless one?" So maybe at that time in 2019, the majority of plumbers try to talk you out of it, mainly because, again, they're not electricians. That's not their trade. They'd rather be doing the same thing they've been doing for 50 years, putting the same old technologies, and I wanted a new technology. So I really had to work hard to find the right plumber. And today it's a lot easier to find that right plumber, and there's so many more incentives, and there's so much more positive media about heat pumps. So I think hopefully that one you will have less barriers, but you should be aware that many plumbers I talked to tried to talk me out of it. Let's talk about another comparison of these hybrid heat pump water heaters when it comes to sizing your hot water heater. A typical family 4 on the left might have a 50-gallon gas water heater, maybe a 65-gallon, but let's just for this sake of this example say 50-gallon. If you go and upgrade to a heat pump, you're going to need to upgrade the size too, to typically 55 to 60 if you have that hybrid heat pump that has the radiant power. In my case, I don't have that radiant hybrid. I'm just a standard heat pump. So I showed you the picture of the 83-gallon tank I had. So and I was really hunting for the highest energy efficiency, but that means you need to a larger tank to store your hot water. So larger tanks can compensate for the slower recovery time. When you have this larger tank, you can store more hot water and more people can shower. So just to give you an idea, get you ready. So when you do this upgrade, you're going to probably end up with a larger tank. So the next question is, where do you install them? There are a couple places, as I mentioned. Number one, the air source heat pump needs air, so it's got to be in a room of at least 7 feet by 7 feet tall, 10 feet by 10 feet. A garage is a great place in our temperate California climate. So that over in the upper right-hand side, you can see is a garage install. That's garages have plenty of room. They're typically hot. And if it cools it down in the winter, not a big problem because usually you're not in the garage. If it's a little cooler, it doesn't really matter. Otherwise, louvered doors or ducts. So I can't really see in this picture, but this is a louvered door if in a closet there. This is actually also showing a ducted solution where the incoming air is coming in from the right pipe here, and then it's pushing out on the left-hand pipe, for example. So these units do have the ability to get some ducting. And there's some places like my sister-in-law in El Cerrito, she had like an outdoor water heater in a closet. And so hers is outdoors. And since California's climate is rather temperate, that's absolutely fine. It's not like winter time out there. So those are some common installation areas. I want to also show you a picture of the 120 volt heat pump water heat installations that I mentioned. This gives you a little bit of a visual of laundry room and maybe garages or closets. It just typically, what does it look like when it's all done? Okay, but it just goes to show you there's been a lot of them out there, and there's good experience out there. Okay, now I know a lot of people here were interested in costs and incentives of the heat pump water heater, so let's dive in and talk about that. Now, a typical heat pump water heater cost, if we again looked at the 50, 65, and 80 gallon sizes, I just went to an online store and looked last week to see what are the costs these days. So 1800, 2200, 2600, right? For if you could go to the hardware store and buy one, that's pretty much what it costs. But then you have to pay for installation and the removal of your old one. You may have to run new electrical there, and you may have to do the ducting that we talked about. So in California, at least, the average installed cost of a heat pump water heater exchange is about $6,000. So that's just a number to be aware of. But the good news is that compared to the time when I installed mine in 2019 and I got zero rebates and incentives, there's been a lot of new federal, state, and local incentives now and rebates that are available to the tune of $2,000 to $5,000. So it really covers a lot of the distance to the $6,000 installed cost. The federal incentives that came into place in 2023, January, was a result of the Inflation Reduction Act signed by Congress, and it allowed for a 10-year 30% federal tax credit all the way till 2032. And that 30% federal tax credit is up to $2,000 per heat pump water heater. And so everybody on this call, anyone who pays taxes at least would be eligible for the federal tax credit, even if you don't have state or local incentives. But what I wanted to share is a comparison of what if several of you here said that your water heater was about to conk out. So I'm glad that you're doing some preparation here and education to see what would be the difference if I switching from, should I keep my gas one or should I switch to heat pump? So I did a little model here, and let's say if we did a gas one and the purchase price is $1,000 for a gas water heater and the installation was 800, that typically, maybe it's $1,800 to replace gas for gas. And so I don't get any federal tax credit, but that's what I'm going to pay I'm going to get a bid, and that's what it is, 1,800 bucks. But what if I chose an electric heat pump? I mentioned to you that the prices were 2,000 something. So let's just say 2,500, the installation 3,500, and that average price in California was $6,000 you can see this is a lot more expensive, right? That's why plumbers would say, why do you want to do 6,000 when we could do 1,800? Well, the answer is that today, one of the sponsors of today's presentation is Silicon Valley Power, the community choice energy aggregator for the city of Santa Clara. And they're offering a $3,000 rebate. Uh, there is also a Bay Area, BayREN, Association of Governments, that are sometimes offering what a rebate for contractors of $1,000. So this actually doesn't come into my pocket or your pocket as a consumer, but they go to the installer. The installer can pass it down to, in many cases, does pass down the costs to the consumer. And so it reduces the overall cost from 6,000 minus rebates to 2,000. And then I could still take the 30% federal tax credit. So it gets down to $1,400. So that is less than the $1,800 for gas. I also want to point out that for income qualified customers, there are even more incentives. And some of us have read in the news lately that an income qualified customer in the Bay Area's definition is, if you're earning $100,000 as a family, you might still be considered income qualified. It's not really poverty levels. It's really um, uh, different metrics. So each city, the state of California, the federal have different um, metrics for what is income qualified, but as Joanne mentioned earlier, there was for Silicon Valley Power, there was an extra $1,000 for income qualified consumers. And if that's the case, then you're down to 1,000. You take your 30% tax credits, so it's $700 for this column on the right. So really, these days, again, compared to when I got my heat pump water heater and I had no local incentives and no federal tax credits, it's really like a no-brainer right now to think go to heat pump even on the initial cost, right? So it's a good deal right out of the gate. But I also want to explain that heat pump water heaters are not only good out of the gate, but they are the most cost-effective solution over time as well. Uh, and this chart here just shows you the cost of energy of powering your gas water heater versus powering your electric heat pump water heater over the number of years. And what I did here is that every time you buy one of these appliances, it comes with this yellow sticker that tells you, the nationwide average to run this estimated yearly cost for this model was $104 for this heat pump on the right hand here. And then I got the yellow sticker for the gas one equivalent. It's 239. So what does that look like? Well, in year one, it's 1,800 plus 239, so it's 2,039 bucks. And you add 104 to each one of these, but then you go all the way out to year 15, 15 years of using it. Your total cost of ownership for gas, 5,385, and you could see your heat pump ones 2,900 and 2,200. Because again, much of it is at 200 to 400% energy efficiency level. That's really helping. Being so energy efficient, that's reducing your cost over time. So not only are you saving up front, but you're saving over time. It's it's a way to go. And this example is just illustrative only. Prices, energy costs, rebates are going to vary across the country and over time, the next 10, 15 years. But at the moment, this is a way to look at these technologies, the newer technologies compared to the old ones. So we would then just conclude the lowest life cycle cost is also thanks to the heat pump water heater. I actually, after I after I converted my home from gas to all electric in 2019, I mentioned to you I got rid of my gas meter, and then after 1 year in an all electric home in 2020, I gathered 5 years of electricity bills, and I wanted to see is this all this electric heat pump stuff really saving money? And for me, you can see that. My electric bill went up a lot, but then I had no more gas bill. So in 2020, I actually spent less than I had over the previous years on energy. And then 21 and 22, a little bit COVID year, so I can't really quite explain why it was like this. But in the 3 years immediately after my conversion, it was true. Those things that I read in the report that an all electric home is less costly to run than a gas home. So in my case, it's really penciled out the same. Um, Now, some of the resources I want to share with you. This is an absolutely essential website that you'd like to go to, and I'd like to ask somebody to type it in the chat. The switch is on, switcheson.org is the key place to go to find incentives in your zip code in the state of California. I think they might be trying to go nationwide for anybody on the call here who's outside California. You can still try putting your zip code in, but it will help to find incentives and it will help to find qualified contractors who can access the incentives and who are so let me just give you some examples of incentives in the San Francisco Bay Area where I'm from. We mentioned Silicon Valley Power offering $3,000 per heat pump or $4,000 for income qualified. Silicon Valley Clean Energy, which is another community choice energy out down in the South Bay, they're 2,000 or 3,000 for income qualified. Up in Marin, the numbers are 500 or 2,000 in Marin County. Peninsula Clean Energy is offering a very generous 2,500 or 3,500. And in the city of Palo Alto municipality, it's 3,500 for everybody. If you live in the East Bay or in Marin Clean Energy, Ava Energy or MCE, there are no incentives at this time. But these numbers are always changing, and it turns out like the $3,000 number, 2,000. These really help you get a far way along to reducing the cost here. So let's talk a little bit about finding a contractor and contractors and installers. That's one of our last topics here. And I want to share a case study of a friend of mine, the Yang family of four in Burlingame. They called me in 2021 and they said, Wei-Tai, hey, our existing 50-gallon gas unit has failed. We really want to go with the heat pump water heater. And they actually had 12 days of no hot water. So they were scrambling. And luckily, their plumber put in a temporary gas water heater while they could get time to actually eventually get what was a Bradford White 65-gallon heat pump water heater. So one thing we notice here is they upsized from 50 to 65 gallons, right? They picked a location in their garage, which is what you see here in this picture. They added 240 volt wiring, which was a bit easier in the garage than elsewhere in the house. So that was not a big deal for them. And there really were not 120 volt models available back in 2021. Going back to the first comment, the hardest part for them was to find the right contractor. They really again had multiple contractors saying, just do the gas, just do the gas. They had to insist. They didn't want gas until they finally found the plumber that was able to do the heat pump. Again, it's a lot easier now than it was in 2021. But after they did this, after the whole process was full, their comments are, it was a seamless transition over to electric. They can't tell the difference. We have plenty of hot water. So they're very happy with the changeover. So my message to all of you here is that if your hot water heater is more than 10 years old, you don't have to wait for it to leak before you change it. You can be proactive about upgrading, especially because there are incentives now that may not be there when your thing leaks. And that is the actually end game for any hot water heater is that probably in year 12 or 14 or 16, they're going to leak. And then suddenly you're going to get in the shower and there's going to be no hot water and like, what's going on? And then you'll go out and find that your thing has rusted and leaked out. So you don't really have to wait for that day. And this is like 99% of people wait until it leaks. And then the fastest way for them to change is to just do gas for gas. And so we as a society have to pivot the way we normally change our water heaters and be proactive instead of waiting until the failure point. So again, in summary, if you can go check on your water heater, usually there's a manufacture date on it. And if it's more than 10 years old, I say you'd be a very good candidate to go ahead and proactively upgrade and start your savings sooner, right? Like I showed you. So go to the switcheson.org. You can click on find a contractor, type in your zip code, and you can see all these spot maps. This is for the state of California. There are a lot of contractors out there that can do heat pump water heaters nowadays. So let me conclude by just suggesting some next steps as you leave today's meeting. If your current water heater is 10 years old or more, think about upgrading soon. You can identify qualified local installers and just start to vet them, have them give quotes, start to compare, have people come look in to see what type of electrical change you might need, or do you need ducting, or where are you going to put it, in the garage or in a closet? Just start talking about sooner so you're not doing it urgently. And then, when you're ready, just act soon, just pull the trigger and make it happen, because some of the funding definitely dries up. Something even every 6 months, there are changes in policies that may or may not happen. And we do know that the current president in Washington has threatened to eliminate the Inflation Reduction Act, and it's actually right now in the reconciliation bill. There's discussions of whether the 20%, sorry, the 30% tax credit in the $2,000 would be eliminated at some point in time. So some of these, this is really a moving target in terms of the financial side of things. So I just say act now. And with that, why don't we take some questions? Joanna, maybe you could help me and just go through questions, read them to me, and we'll answer them. And if anybody would like to ask a question live, you can raise your hand, and we'll pull you on the screen, and you can ask your question live. And
Yeah.
if any, yeah, go ahead, Joanna.
Yeah, thanks so much, Wei-Tai. So I'll just start shouting out some questions. So one was, what are the warranties for a heat pump water heater? Gas are usually around 10 years, so
Oh gosh, that's I don't know off the top of my head. 5 years, 10 years, I think I've seen, but I haven't checked recently, so I better punt on that question.
okay, no worries. I can answer that in the follow-up email as well. Um, Another one was, do you know the temperature difference between 120 versus 240 volts?
Okay, so I mentioned that you can use a 120 volt unit or 240 volt unit. The difference, the temperature of your water will always be what your target set point is. So it means if you want 140 degrees, you'll set your tank for 140 degrees. It's just that the 240 volt more powerful one will get there faster. It's going to heat up your water faster than the 120, which will be slower. Okay, so you're still going to get the same 140-degree water, but you will have to wait longer to get it. And I will say this, that most of the time in California now, the plumbing code requires something called a mixing valve, so that it mixes that 140 hot water coming out to a more, so it doesn't burn your skin when you're in the shower, right? So it comes down to 110 or whatever that number is. And 140 is a number, could be 130. If you have a small tank, you could go up higher. You could go higher than 140 even with a small tank, and that gives you more capacity with a mixing valve. So your plumbers are going to be able to answer that question. But I think if your question is, if you worry about will the 120 be colder than a 240, no, it's more about speed and not temperature.
Nice. Okay, interesting. Um, some people asked about the noise level produced by the water heater. How much louder or equally loud is it to gas?
Yeah, that's a good question. And I mentioned a refrigerator noise as an example of something you could go into your kitchen, be very quiet, get a chair and sit there and wait for it to come on. Because your refrigerator doesn't run, the heat pump doesn't run all the time on it, but when it does run, sort of pay attention to how much noise it is. Um, and I have heard that some people have been upset by after they've installed a heat pump water heater because they put it on the next to their bedroom, like on the other side of the wall of their bed. And it was like that they were very sensitive to that noise. And so, as opposed to if it was out in the garage making a little bit of vibration. So, definitely, I have heard both things. Like some people say, it's the noise is nothing, we never hear it. But there are other people who say, oh, it really bothered me, usually because of the location of where it was near a guest room or your bedroom or something. So I would say either go to your refrigerator and look, or if you have a friend with a heat pump water heater, go listen to theirs. You can look on the rating sheet and it'll say the decibel level 45, 50, 55. That's a little academic, but each one does report, and there are units that are quieter. Some heat pump units are quieter than others. And in my case, remember, I have a split unit, so I have my tank in the house and I have the heat pump outside my house, so I don't happen to have the noise problem. So there are many alternatives that are worth it if you are sensitive to noise. Great question.
Yeah, that is a good one. And then a little bit back, not necessarily for warranty, but just in general, what is the average lifespan of a heat pump water heater? Like how long until you replace one of those?
Yeah, I think it's the tank is the same material. So I think that typically the 10 to 15, 10 to 20 years, I would say, is the expected lifetime of these products.
Okay. Okay, this one I'm just gonna read straight off. So I heard that hybrid heat pump water heaters can be set to heat pump only mode, but if the water temperature drops below a certain temperature, then the heating elements will kick in regardless. Are there any heat pump water heaters that really only operate in heat pump mode?
Yes, so let's restate that question. That this is a nuance that I'm not aware of, but it's if I had that example of the hybrid unit with the electric elements, the questioner is saying that even if you put hybrid only, those electric elements will kick in and be overriding your hybrid only. So is there somebody that well, can you get one that's not hybrid? And the answer is yes. The 120 volt water heaters, I believe, are generally not hybrid. Remember, they're slow and they won't have that radiant element. So I'm pretty sure, at least in the early 120 volts, they were not hybrid. They're heat pump only. So that's one way. My unit again is an example of there's no radiant element in mine, my split unit. It just happens to be that way. So you probably have to look at and ask that question and study the data sheet for the unit that you're interested in. That's a good technical question though.
Okay, interesting. Um, so instead of using a hybrid to handle occasional heavy use of hot water, one could use non-hybrid with a larger tank. Could you do
Right.
that? What are there pros and cons to that?
Yes, that's right. So you could upsize your tank because, again, you sort of want to think about if you're typically a 50-gallon tank with four people in the family. It really depends. Like, are all four people going to shower one after another? And are they taking really long showers using a lot of hot water? Did you change your shower head to water conserving, or are they like old ones that have lots coming out, right? So it really gets down to like what's your house like and what's your usage in your bathrooms, because if you're using a lot of hot water quickly, the poor 120 volt recharger is going to take many hours to get you back up and running. So if you have those instances um, where you're going to need a quicker recharge, then you could just get a bigger and bigger and bigger tank and right store more and more and more hot water so that when you have those four long showers, you got you stored it all away, and you've done it with 120 volt very efficiently, right? You've preheated it up. And so that is, that is a way to compensate. You just do a bigger tank and more hybrid.
Okay, nice. Does a heat pump make the surrounding area cold as it moves the hot air from outside to the heater?
And the answer is yes, because all that heat going into the water is coming from the air, uh, the air around the heat pump. So it will cool down that 10 by 10 room, 3 degrees or something. It's not like it'll cool it down 20 degrees, right? We're talking a little bit. And the bigger the room, the less it cools it down. So I'm not sure how noticeable it is, but it does have a cooling effect. Again, just like your refrigerator, does it put heat into your kitchen? It's heating your kitchen up a little, probably not by 10 degrees, but by a couple degrees, right? So it's the reverse of your refrigerator.
I see. Um, so someone gave a more specific question. I live in a condo building that has two large commercial grade gas water heaters to 51 units. Can we buy a heat pump water heater with enough power and capacity to replace those? And do you know if those qualify for the rebates and incentives?
Okay, so condo owners that in this case are using shared hot water as opposed to some condos have everybody has their own, right? So this is a question about condo owners or even apartment owners who are sharing. The answer is that there are multifamily building incentives uh, from the state of California, maybe by the local jurisdictions. Again, if you go to the switches on and the plumbers that are in your region are generally more familiar um, with what incentives they can get you. But the technical answer is yes. There are heat pump water heaters for shared deployments. The guy who installed my residential one, for example, was just telling me the other week ago on Earth Day. He said, "Hey, Wei-Tai, we just did a whole apartment complex doing exactly what you talked about. We had these big tanks. We had consolidated. If there are 50 units, we didn't have to buy 50 heat pumps. We did, some smaller number with bigger tanks." So the answer is yes, this technology will work in multifamily arrangements, and there are in federal and state incentives as well. So push your building owner and homeowner association to look in that direction.
Nice. And you mentioned switches on, but just for to double check, are there any other resources that you'd recommend for like different manufacturers and models for heat pumps, their specific specifications and reliability, things like that?
Yeah, I mean, I think Actera, and for this purpose of this webinar, we are manufacturer agnostic. But that being said, there is a list in California and in the of approved units that can get these incentives. Um, uh, you know, 8-page list of every manufacturer and which model number, because I think Joanna in one of the earlier slides said that it had to have a uniform energy factor, a UEF of 3.3 or greater. There's some technical number of efficiency that these units must exceed, and not all of them do. And so there's a list that's published and often referenced in when you get into the details there. So your plumber will know what's on the list that they can get the $3,000 incentive and which ones will not qualify. So you don't actually have infinite choice, but there are at least 6 to 10 major brands out there that have many, many units and sizes now, as compared to 6 years ago when the list was probably three. There's a lot of choices now.
Okay, nice. Um, okay, if my electrical panel does not have enough capacity, do you have a rough estimate of what it would cost to upgrade the panel to allow for this capacity?
That's hard to really case by case basis. I will say that there are presentations and webinars out there that will say that most houses in California can, even with you have a smaller panel, 50 amp panel or 100 amp panel is enough for most cases if you do it smartly and plan smartly. Just upsizing your panel to the 200 amp panel size is just a lazy way to get all the amperage you need. And we really can't have everybody on our street upgrading to 200 amps, because then PG&E has to come upgrade the whole street, right? So that's really not a viable path to do upgrades. That being said, many of the today's Silicon Valley Power has an incentive for upgrading your your box, if, and I can't remember if it's just for income qualified or for everybody, but some jurisdictions will offer that for everybody, and some will offer even more money for income qualified. So the answer is that there's money there as well. And the Inflation Reduction Act originally contemplated to offer incentives for upsizing your breaker box.
Okay, great. Okay, I think we have one last question.
Okay, these are good.
Okay, is there any opportunity to combine the heat pump water heater with a new heat pump HVAC system, like a single heat pump, for example?
Yes, actually, and so the question is like, you have a heat pump heating up water in your house. Could you also use it to heat your home? and through all that hot water, could you run hot water coils under your floor, or could you have a radiator, the good old-fashioned radiator? And in Europe, the answer is this is very common. It's very common to have a heat pump have multiple functions, not just heating your water. And there is a company in California called Harvest Thermal that makes a product that does both, that heats your water and heats your home. I would say that, and I believe there's incentives for that, but today we've been focused more on the incentives that are just straight up on hot water heaters. But the good news is, yes, that's I would say the Europeans have been doing it for a while, but in America we haven't done that integrated approach yet. But technically, it's possible.
Okay, great. Um, so if there's any more questions, you can feel free to reach out and I can pass things on to Wei-Tai if there's things that I can't answer. And just one more thing to share. Oops, if I can present quickly, maybe not, but here very quickly is our upcoming events. We'll be doing a thing called Promise to the Planet. For all of the people who support Actera, we'll be at Hidden Valley in San Jose area and Hidden Villa, excuse me. And that will be a really fun event. And we'll also be doing a Sunnyvale ride and drive for people to see the different EVs that are out in the market and speak to our ambassadors who can talk about their personal experience, similar to what Wei-Tai just did, but for their electric vehicles. And that'll be in Sunnyvale Baylands. And if you enjoyed this workshop, we'll be doing a second one on HVAC systems. Similar style, we'll be doing it online and have our local expert. And that will be later in June. And so thank you again, everyone, for joining. It was really great, a lot of really great questions. I'll be sure to get all those answers into the follow-up email as well as some additional links. And that's it. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you
Yeah,
everybody for joining and spending the time. Hope you all learned something helpful. Good luck in checking out and the switch from gas to electric.
great.